Hello, this is Maddie. This is my module 12. Um, One of the ways that I believe my reality has been shaped by male centeredness is that I seek out male validation as the highest form of validation. Instead of seeking internal validation for myself, I look for men to define my value as a woman. This is because of the heteronormative assumption that has been molded into me that I should be straight and desire attention from men around me. I have tried not to do this act of centering male attention, but it is ingrained into me societally. It is harder to overcome. When the author writes about his time in college, he spoke about when he was in school clubs, he would not care about his opinions of his fellow female peers. He stated he only cared about what the men in these groups said, and that his attention was centered toward their experience. This relates to how I view male validation because I might ignore validation from women because I am not centering their attention or experiences. How I perceive other people and their intentions are different because when I look at men, I think, oh, I hope they think I'm good looking. One way that I have rethought about the definition of gender is within sexual scripts and how I believe certain things should be facilitated differently according to gender. Within gender roles in sexual scripts, I had the conception that men were supposed to go after you and you were supposed to attract them. This is a dangerous idea that can be used to perpetuate violence against women, if it is assumed that women want to be chased regardless of what they say. Gender shapes sexual scripts because we are under the presumption that gender can indict sexual behavior, but it cannot. The author writes in his excerpt that he only saw women for what they could do for him sexually and did not view their feelings as equal. He was under the assumption that women around him wanted to be pursued regardless of what they said otherwise because of this misconception about gender roles and sexual scripts. Powell also stated that in college he realized that every man was a pimp and that they were the sexist attitudes that these men had about women. These men sought after women using sexism as a guide for how their relationships should behave. There are some ways that my conception of gender has stayed the same, and that is because I believe that they're already more progressive. I do not believe that masculinity and femininity really have any defining features other than what it means to the individual person. I do not believe that gender is a real thing. In my opinion, it is a social concept that changes depending on your culture. I also do not believe that there are any innate differences between gender identities because it can be so variable from person to person. That we as a people still value gender within these concepts, like traits and behaviors, but we do not do anything to change how we view these concepts. We also continue to try to degender traits, but we do not do anything to change the inequalities that are associated with gender. We are happy when people do things outside of the norms of their gender, but we have to remind them how they are not conforming. We allow people to do whatever they like regardless of gender, but people will inform you that you are still part of a gender concept. Kimmel states that he knows that all of the traits and behaviors people do are gendered, but we need to reassign meaning to these concepts in regards to gender. With Kimmel's son's answer, it does show that there is a change in how we are viewing the differences between gender. That the opposite of boy is not girl, but man. This is because of the degendering of these traits. Though the older woman was most likely looking for a response that reinforces the belief that men and women are more different than they are alike. Some of the impacts of degendering is that you see people now more than ever choosing jobs that they want regardless of gender. The traditional jobs done by women versus men are paid differently because people still place differences in the genders. We still value men's time over women's because of the preconceived notion that there is a gender difference in work. As a society, we remove gender from certain concepts like work, but do not address gender disparities that remain, like the gender pay gap. Title IX, that's what I'm going to call it because I don't know how to read Roman numerals. Title IX is the requirement that all federally funded educational programs have equality. Sports became shaped by it because male sports teams got more accreditation and respect than female sports teams of the same caliber. I know that at MTSU they have to follow the Title XI in order to get federal funding, and that if there is a club with something to do with gender, there would be an equal one. I will say I do not believe that MTSU puts as much of an emphasis on female-led organizations and teams as much as they do their males. Across the nation, it was not taken seriously because it was thought no one would want to see women athletes compete. It was thought that there was no reason we should pay women to play sports, even though men on MTSU sports teams were paid. Title XI comes up in a different situation in sports other than getting paid, like in who is allowed to participate on what team. Title IX has been used to discriminate against people who are transgender in sports as well, indicating that if a trans person plays, there will not be equality. There is a suggestion that having Title IX means furthering gender differences because you are not allowing them to play on the same team. I think most people do not realize when you only have one club, it can make it hard for people who do not look like you to join a group. Title IX also ensures the equal amount of resources is allocated for sports and that we are not excluding anyone because of their gender. Some of the misconceptions that people had about women before the implementation of Title IX is that women should not play sports altogether. People were concerned that women become too masculine because they played sports. You are allowed to play as long as you adhere to the gender binary, because if you do not do that, suddenly it makes it unfair. We allow people to discriminate against children because they do not fit into the societal expectation for what they believe they should look like. People were concerned that it would be used to discredit trans individuals because they do not look like the stereotypical gender expression. Title IX is being used to exclude trans people on the basis of equality, but it creates more when we do not allow them to play. We assume that trans people are inherently different and cause inequality just for their participation, when in reality nobody is harmed. I believe they use it against trans individuals because it is easy to point out how differences make things unfair, but in reality it is only unfair when we do not allow them to play. Title IX was necessary because it showed women that they can do all of the same activities as men and people will care. It supports self-esteem in these girls because they are never limited because of their gender. Title IX also pushes for more support of women's interests in general. They are never told that they will not be allowed to participate because of what they are. Title IX is helpful for ensuring equality, but it can be used to harm others when you think that there is actual differences between the genders where they need to be separated. It is a good example because you can have social changes, but if law or policy does not change, there will still be institutional inequality. It is nice for other people to believe that you can do anything, but actually having the ability is more beneficial for gender equality. These structural changes are more important because you can have the ability to use the law to protect yourself. Overall, when we remove these boundaries, we allow people to actually do something with the change that they want to see. In the article about Title IX, the first ever female coach for MTSU was told unsupportive comments by a male friend when she got hired as the first coach. Since there were more structural changes, there was nothing that people who didn't agree with women's sports could do. So the fact that he didn't agree with it means that he couldn't do anything. When we remove these barriers, people can use the law to protect themselves against gender discrimination. Title IX allowed women to be at the forefront with their male counterparts, but without these boundaries being removed, this wouldn't have happened. One institutional change that I thought of was the allowance for men and women to go on paternity leave, not just women. This moves us closer because it reframes who we think of as the caregiver of the family and who is supposed to stay with the kids. I believe that it also shortens the gender pay gap, because the gender pay gap indirectly attacks mothers because they are seen as less committed than fathers. This institutional change supports gender equality because you are no longer saying that women are mothers or that men work more. we make an equal opportunity. Thank you.